stretch! What a stretch to finish out April. The weather's been great. Have we had a ball game, an outside sporting event canceled at all this spring?
No, we've had some games moved from away locations to our home facility with the turf, but I mean, we might have had a storm come through really early on in the year that canceled a couple baseball, softball, but other than that, it's been a very nice spring, cooler than we'd like, and a little bit too windy at times, but I think we're turning the corner.
But how much of a benefit is that to have your facilities be a place where teams can contact you, 10, 11 in the morning? Hey, it's a little wet over here. Not sure it's going to dry out. Can we play at your field this year and see about, getting back to ours next year? How much of a blessing is that for you all?
Great. And I think the one challenge that we've seen is so we kind of plant the seed early in the morning when we know that rains come through and say, hey, our field's playable as long as we can get umpires, we're ready to roll. And it's worked out 3 or 4 times this year because at the end of the day, the kids want to play. They don't really care where they're playing. They just want to get on the field. So it's nice to have this luxury.
No doubt. Very good. Well, Mr. Clapp, let's talk about a couple of points of conversation that have really dominated the discussion with your peers here the last few visits I've had. First of all, being artificial intelligence. I had one of your peers say this has been the biggest change to education since the internet. So how about artificial intelligence? And, what's Monticello doing with this in your district?
So I would agree. It could be the biggest change to education since the internet if schools kind of embrace it. So here at Monticello, we started looking into this over Christmas break. Clay Dunker, one of our computer teachers at the elementary schools, sent me an email just about AI, and we discussed and formed a study group. So there are 2 administrators and 3 tech savvy teachers on this committee. Not really a committee, more of a work study group that we've just kind of dove into how we can leverage AI and support teachers and look at how we can personalize learning for students, and then how can we educate students and staff on the ethical use of AI. So we're really diving into the first part of increasing teacher efficiency, and that's kind of where our focus has been right now, is just giving teachers the flexibility to try out different platforms in a way that can benefit and save time. The concept we've really embraced is how can we get 10 to 20 to 30 minutes back of your prep period by leveraging some of these AI tools.
Yeah. So what kind of education, whether it's continuing education, whether it's training, those sorts of things, what kind of things have you done to not only just educate your staff about this, but then teach them best ways, best tools, best practices for this growing, kind of trend in education?
So we really dove into as a study group, meeting once a month starting in January. We had our first district-wide PD session 2 weeks ago. Basically, we had about 30 staff members attend, and each one of the committee members presented something that a teacher could take back into the classroom the next day and utilize. So one was a slideshow presentation maker. One was a data analysis, how you can use, maybe take test scores and create small groups for specified instruction in the classroom. And the goal from that is just to give teachers the green light to play with these platforms and see how they can benefit them in their own classroom. And then the goal is also to provide some PD over the summer for teachers, not mandatory, because at the end of the day, it's something that you need to be comfortable with and confident in. It's not going to be forced and pushed down your throat that you have to do this, but it's something that if we can show teachers benefits and then provide them the training necessary so they can be successful, that's what we want to do. Mm-hmm. And then we'll also have some PD opportunities next fall for just what's on the cutting edge, things like that. So there's several platforms that are out there. Magic School AI is one that's huge. And there's the free version, there's a paid version. We're going to get some training on that. There's ChatGPT, Claude, but really we're trying to hone in on what would be most beneficial for our teachers. And essentially we know that kids are using this too. And so we sent out a survey to our high school students, just to gather feedback from them on what they are using so we can better understand how they're using it. And then how can we teach students how to ethically use AI.
You kind of segued me perfectly there, Mr. Clapp. There was a couple of things in there I wanted to go to next. The first is, just for your teachers, for me, I was telling you a little bit about how I use AI off the air. For me, it's falling into the trap of just completely taking everything AI has and like using that just like without putting my own touch on it or whatever,
Right.
filtering it, if you will. How do you educate teachers on, okay, yes, AI has all this great information, all these great things, but we still need to do what we do, and that sort of thing. Speak to that a little bit and that balance.
Well, at the end of the day, AI is just a tool. You can't take out the human side of producing work. So from a teacher to student standpoint, it's easy to detect. Like you could probably detect if you read a passage and said, "Yep, this is generated by AI," because of the verbiage used, or just the syntax of. I think that's a key. But there are tools to detect students using AI, and I think that's one of the fears. In some classrooms is, students are just using AI to produce their work in their own use. So it's, you and I talked prior to get on here, like it's easy just to throw something into Claude or ChatGPT and it produce what you want, but it doesn't sound personal or like you. It sounds like a robot generated passage.
Yep, sure.
And to me, that takes the personal side out of things. And that's not what we want. But we do think it's a great revision tool, and has purposes in that way.
Well, and like a lot of these things, students probably have been using AI, whether it's for school or just personal, fun, whatever they see, however they're using AI these days. Kids are probably as ahead of the game on this one. How do you catch up? And you talked about the cheating aspect of it. I know there's ways you can know if a something written by a student was written by AI or something like that. But how about just teaching students responsibility, maybe even catching up to where they are at in this process?
And that's why we sent out the original student survey, is just to learn from them. And typically, students are ahead of those things anyway. I can think back to like 8 or 9 years ago with this app on phones, which kind of probably will segue into the next conversation we'll have. This app on phones called Photo Math, and we years and years ago, we were seeing students do extremely well on homework, but not well on quizzes or tests. Well, Photo Math is an app, and you screenshot a math problem and it works it out for you, and you can do really well on homework. So going back to that, we had to address, talk about Photo Math openly and honestly with students. Like, this is not helping you get to your goals of actually learning and retaining the information we're teaching, and just being upfront with students and saying that completion is not the goal. Learning and maintaining that information is the goal. So I think just open and honest communication with students. We have great kids at Monticello, and not to say that students don't use AI, but when we have these open and honest communications about the ethical use, I think those are positive, and we can kind of learn from each other. And at the end of the day, when you walk across the stage as a Monticello Sage, we want you to have the tools to succeed in college. So you need to learn about this platform, but you also still need to be able to produce the work yourself.
What did you hear from students about AI in that survey you referenced?
Just mainly the different platforms that are being used. Some students, Claude is a preferred chatbot, and it really was just using using AI for editing purposes, and just learning about the platforms they use.
Gotcha. Did you ask them, how they use it for, education or in terms of homework? Did you dive into, not to have them tell on themselves in a way, but, did you ask for that open-ended kind of conversation type?
Yeah, and that was one of the things that came up in our survey, that AI has been used for homework. It has been used in to revise papers, and there it was anonymous, so it wasn't like we were trying to go out and catch you doing this. We were just hoping to gain some information from our end, from our committee standpoint, to better educate the ethical use, and for that.
I figured it was anonymous. Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
For sure. Yeah. Interesting. Well, it really is kind of changing the game in a lot of ways. It's making things a lot more efficient. For sure. It's just now will you have to amend like board, not necessarily board policy, but like school handbook policy or anything like that? Is that part of this continued exploration into AI?
Yeah, so I anticipate handbook language changing, adding the use of AI to exclusively produce student work as a form of plagiarism or cheating. And then also, I do see us looking at board policy as well on how to best utilize these technologies for teaching and instruction as well.
Yeah. Well, and the flip side of that is I have seen a little bit of discussion from kind of student forums in various places where it's like I was accused of using AI, but I didn't, and I can prove it, and those sorts of things. And then also, the one of the other things, and I wish I could remember who mentioned this to me, but one of the things that was brought up to me was like, you can put a student's paper into that AI generator to cross-check, right? To see did they use AI. But that's not always accurate, because some students, just the way they formulate their words and phrases, can come off like an AI type of a format, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think there's some challenges that we're working through as well, as far as if you used an AI tool to proofread your essay, that potentially could show up in an AI detector. So there are some challenges that we see, but the good news is we're having these conversations on the front end, because at the end of the day, like you mentioned at the very beginning, like this tool has the potential to change education just like the internet did, but if we don't learn about it and we don't try to see how it could benefit us, the potential is 20 years from now, you look in our classrooms and the classrooms look identical to what they do today. So learning about it, learning how it could increase teacher efficiency, look how it could increase personalized learning for students, and studying those things are very, very important, especially on the early stages of this.
Sure. Well, you talked about, Mr. Clapp, a program where a student can take a picture and it does the math homework for them. That, of course, can be done on their cell phone. I'll tell you what, let's take a break. On the other side, we'll talk about that proposed cell phone ban bill in the state of Illinois. Mr. Adam Clapp is the superintendent of Monticello Schools, my guest on the Zoom. More to come with Mr. Clapp on the morning show. WHOW.
Weeknow.com.
Let's check the markets now on the RFD Radio Network. We're right across the board with corn, beans, and Chicago wheat. May corn down 8, 467 and a quarter. July corn down 8, 475 and a quarter. New crop December 445 down 5 and a quarter. May beans also in the red, down 14 and a quarter, 1037 and 3/4. July beans down 13 and a half, 1049, and new crop November 1022 and a half, down 12 and a quarter. May Chicago wheat down 3 and a quarter, 512 and a quarter. July wheat down 2 and a half, 528 and a half. May bean meal 286 even, down $1. May bean oil down $1, 548.86. Livestock market, May feeders up $1.80, 293.60. April live cattle is up 60 cents at this hour, 216.25. And May lean hogs down half $1, 92.45. Energy market, June crude oil is down $1.19, 60.85. Jim Taylor, RFD Radio Network.
Shane here from Highway 51 Exchange, just south of Clinton.
Let us service your lawn and garden equipment for spring with our quick turnaround and service specials for free pickup and delivery. Click our icon on DeWittDailyNews.com for details.
Longview Community Bank provides real local ag lending. Vice President and Loan Officer Nate Sams here, asking you to find out the many ag lending products we can offer your farm by clicking our ad on the local news page of DeWittDailyNews.com.
There's a reason WHOW is the Big 1520 across central Illinois. That's because anytime the sun is up, you can hear WHOW's big signal from Jacksonville to Peoria, from Pontiac to the Indiana state line, and to Charleston and Effingham. Anywhere you travel in central Illinois, take WHOW, the Big 1520, with you in your car, truck, or tractor. Just another reason why WHOW is Central Illinois' news, agriculture, and talk station.
Your friend in Central Illinois, WHOW.
Once again, good morning. Thanks for being with us. I'm your host today, Seth Lawrence. The WHOW Morning Show streams to Facebook and YouTube, brought to you by Peterson Insurance, your Pekin Insurance agent in Clinton. Mr. Adam Clapp, Superintendent of Monticello Schools, my guest on the Zoom today. And, you know, Mr. Clapp, we talked about that cell phone ban bill that is kind of being floated in Springfield right now. I'm curious, your thoughts. Does Monticello currently have anything addressing cell phones in schools? How about that?
So at the middle school and high school typically are where the issues with cell phones lie. And at the middle school, the directives from the handbook and administration are that cell phones are in lockers. So I would say for the most part, cell phones are in lockers. Students access their phones at their lockers between passing periods at times, but as far as cell phones in the classroom, that typically does not happen at the middle school. And if it does, then there's a cell phone violation that, you know, gets an office referral and things of that nature. At the high school, our handbook says cell phones should be out of sight while in the classroom. We do allow our students to take their cell phones with them in their book bags or on their person. But they should be out of sight during class time unless teacher gives permission. So the cell phone ban from Springfield, essentially nothing would change at the middle school as the language is written, but it would be interesting to see how this bill plays out. But at the high school, we may have to make some adjustments depending on how specific this ban becomes. Now, the intent of the ban is, you know, cell phones and just that social media distraction takes away from the learning environment, and we understand that that happens in our classrooms at times at the high school. But I'm hopeful that with the cell phone ban, there'll still be some local control to how that bill is written in our policies and things like that. I do see the benefit of trying to eliminate some of those distractions and concentrate on creating that distraction-free learning environment. But I'm hopeful that we'll be able to do it in a way that's still controlled by Monticello Board of Education and in our schools.
Well, and that seems to be kind of the sticking point on this, is whether you're for it or against it. You know, the whole idea of local control is kind of where it all comes back to. So would you rather be allowed just to say, hey, this is how we're going to handle cell phones in our schools, or would you rather have that directive from the state that kind of gives you a box frame to work in, and then you craft how you want to fill that in, if that makes sense?
I think what you said there is still being able to have the flexibility to do what we need to do here in Monticello. And I think that's, whether however the bill is passed, that's what I'm hopeful for. I'm confident that the bill is going to pass. It's a Governor Pritzker initiative, and it's something that's it's got momentum, and I think it will pass in some form. I'm just hopeful that it'll give us the flexibility to do what we need to do here in Monticello in order for it to benefit our kids.
Well, and I don't, you've been around education long enough, Mr. Clapp, oftentimes that's not exactly how state of Illinois legislation comes to be, so, but I guess we'll wait to see on this one. But I have heard it's kind of vaguely written, so maybe there is a little wiggle room, maybe a little room for some local control things, but it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. How much of an issue are cell phones in Monticello schools? I mean, I've talked to educators that say it's a huge problem, especially the stuff that happens outside the school day that spills into the school walls. Other places say, it's really an issue in our buildings. Where does Monticello stand with all this?
So I would say, as far as cell phone violations, where it becomes a disciplinary issue at school for kids improperly using them during the school day, there's a handful of those each quarter, but it's not like a huge prevalent problem. Where I do see an issue is that social media distraction piece, that maybe something happened outside of the school day that spills over into the school day, and then it just doesn't stop. And that's the piece that we're constantly working on, trying to have that disconnect. Like, you don't need to be connected to these social media platforms all the time. And I do believe that cell phones, smartphones, it's like having a computer in your pocket. There are, if used for an educational benefit, there's some positives, but if it's just used to keep in contact with these social media platforms, it's a distraction.
Sure. Well, Mr. Clapp, let's wrap up today. By the way, anything else on all that you want to put out there for us? All right.
No, those are two things that we're keeping an eye on.
Let's dive into end of school year things. Like you told me off the air, next time we catch up, school's going to be done. I can't believe we're here already, but how about the end of the year? What do you got going on?
Yeah, we just had prom. We had about 270 kids attend prom over the weekend. It was awesome. Post prom was at pregame sports, which is a huge asset for the community. It's awesome. Just walking through the hallways at Washington School, we have open house this week, kind of the end of the year open house. It's kind of changed our hallways into like a desert scene, a black light glow hallway, a USA hallway. All of our student works displayed. Graduation is May 18th. We'll have 132 graduates, which is awesome. It's just crazy to think the next time we talk, we've already graduated. Seniors will be out of the hallways. So yeah, I mean, it's just crazy. And then before you know it, we'll be doing all these projects, parking lot, bathroom, elevator, all these things that we've talked about several times.
Man, moving right along. Yep, getting ready for the summer for sure, Mr. Clapp. Can't believe it's already here. Where do folks go for all the latest in the happenings in Monticello schools?
Check us out on sages.us or check us out on Twitter.
Mr. Adam Clapp is the superintendent of Monticello Schools. My guest on the Zoom today. The morning show streams to Facebook and YouTube, brought to you by Peterson Insurance, your Pekin insurance agent in Clinton. Of course, check us out live online all the time at DeWittDailyNews.com. Network news comes your way next on the morning show.
WHOW.